Welcome back to LarryB YouTube channel. In today's class, I'm going to learn how to make this beautiful double puff sleeve that we have here without the elastic. So we did not use elastic to achieve this puff sleeve that we have here. I'm going to be teaching us how to cut and sew this in this tutorial. If this is something you like to learn, kindly stay tuned to the end of this tutorial. Thank you. Okay, so to make this sleeve, it's a double puff sleeve. There are several ways you can make it, but I want to do this without an elastic. You can also gather the hem with elastic, but some people react to elastic, or whatever reasons that you may have that you don't want to use an elastic. This is a method that you can actually use, and it will give you something really beautiful and bouncy as well. The sleeve is not so long, depending on how long you want yours to be, but just know that we're going to be controlling the fullness with a basic sleeve just like I have here. And then if your total length is going to be like up to 10 inches, your basic sleeve should not be up to that, because of course by the time you had the flares, the length of the flares is going to be more than the length of your basic sleeve. So you don't want it to be too much so that you won't have so much excess. So for me, for my sleeve here, I have about 7 inches, so I'm still going to hem it like this, and then I'm going to sew this to my sleeve. So for that, I'm going to need about 1 inch, half an inch for both. So this is going to leave me with around 6 inches total length, which is fine for me. Okay, so what I'm going to do now, remember this is a double puff sleeve, and I have a total of 7 inches. So I'll first divide what I have here by 2 so that I can create the 2 puff sleeves that I need. Okay, so 7 divided by 2 is 3.5, so I'm marking 3.5 like that on the right side of my fabric, and then I'll make it into a straight line. So I'm just trying to get a straight line, and this is a satin fabric, by the way, so that's what I'm using. So I have marked my straight line. So now the next thing is to start creating these flares. Okay, sorry, the line is not straight enough, the fabric is shifting, don't know why. Okay, so this is my new straight line. Please ignore this first line. So to create the flares, you are creating double flares. Now for each of the flare, I'm sewing the first one to this. I have about 3.5 inches here and 3.5 inches there as well. So which means that for you to have that puffiness that you want, you have to add to the 3.5 that you have here. You can double it. If you're doubling it, you have about 7 inches. You can add 2 inches to it, you can add 3 inches, depending on what you want, but I'm just going to try to double this. Okay, so if I'm doubling it, I'll have 7 inches as the length of my flare. And then for the radius of the flare, I'll just measure what I have here on the armhole area. Okay, and then after measuring this, I have about 18 inches. So because of the gathers that we're going to be adding, if you don't go to add this, you can just cut your 18 inches like that, but because I want to gather a little bit, I'll just add few inches to it, and then I'll make it 25 inches. So to cut my flare now, the radius is going to be 25 inches and the length is going to be 7 inches. Remember, we are doubling what we have here for our length. So now the 25 inches that I have here, to get the radius, you just divide it by 6.28 for a full flare. It's a constant, so I'll just do 25 divided by 6.28, and that's going to give me about 4 inches. So that's going to be the radius of my flare. So what you're going to do is to take your fabric and fold it into 4. Okay, we have been doing flares already, so I'm sure this is, so you just fold into 4 like this, and then after folding into 4, you mark 4 inches for your radius. Remember, we divided the 25 by 6.28 to get the 4 inches radius. So you're going to mark 4 inches all around like this. From the starting point here, you mark 4 inches and turn, and then from here you mark your 7 inches, which is the total length, and then you chalk that as well. I have done mine, that's what I'm trying to illustrate with that. So now this is what I have for my 2 puff sleeves. Okay, remember, one is going to come here and the other is going to come here. So I have 2 of them now, and after cutting it, this is what it looks like. So it is still closed on both sides. So what I'm going to do now is to go ahead now and open up one side just like this, so that I can open out for me. I can see that I have 2 flares here. So now to sew this to my basic sleeve, what I'm going to do, I'm going to sew the one on the hem first before sewing this one. And again, you can see that for your basic sleeve, normally if you're drafting your basic sleeve, you come down for your cap's height here, which is what we use to shape the sleeve. So if you want your flare, the first layer flare, if you want it to be on the same level, it means you pick one of the flare that you have here, the one that is going to be on for the upper part. You're going to shape it on the underarm area. The underarm area is this open part. Okay, so now this open part is your underarm. You can see that's the one that is under your armpit. Okay, that part, not the shoulder area. So that part, it means you have to, whatever it is that you have removed here to as your cap's height, you just fold the flare and then you measure that here as well, and then reconnect it. But I don't want mine to be on the same level, that's why I'm just leaving it as it is. I hope you understand that. So now what I'm going to do now, remember this is the radius of the flare, the 25 inches that we're working with, and then this is where the length stops. So what I'm going to do now is to go ahead and gather the lower part, which is where the length stops. I'm going to gather it on this hem to fit into what I have on my hemline. Okay, so you gather all of this to fit your hem, and then we're going to flip it like this. I'm going to walk us through all of it. So I'll first gather all my hem to fit the hem of my sleeve, and then I'll bring it back to show us what we have. So I'm gonna ahead to sew it, as you can see. So when you want to sew, you make sure the wrong side of your main sleeve, your basic sleeve, is facing the right side of your flare, so that by the time you flip the flare, it's going to be neat. Okay, we are flipping like this. So after flipping, you can see how neat it is. So right side of your flare is against the wrong side of your bodies, and that's how you're going to gather it. So to gather it, to make it easier for you, just fold your flare into 4 just like you have it, and then you notch it. And then here on your basic sleeve as well, you fold it into 4 and notch. You can see how I have divided, I've partitioned this into 4, so that it's going to be easy for me. So now after sewing the hem, what I'm going to do now is to flip the radius. Remember, this is the 25 inches radius. Flip the radius now and then sew it to the midpoint. Remember, we have 2 layers, the first 3.5 and the second 3.5. So this particular one, I'm going to be sewing it to the midpoint, which is here, and you can see that I have notched the flare here into 4. So now I'll just match them up now and gather the excess that I have. I'll do the same thing for this second one and gather. So I'll do this now as well. Okay, so I've gone ahead to sew it down, and you can see what we have. So you can see the inner part, and you can see the puffiness that we have going on down there. Okay, if you want it more puffy, you can even throw in your hard net or whatever it is that you know can enhance, but this is puffy enough for me. So if you don't want it this full, you can also work with a half circle flare. You see that we worked with a full circle flare, that's why we have this much volume. So now the next thing I'm going to do now is to grab the other flare and then do the same thing that I did for the first one. I'll go ahead now and notch it at those 4 points. This is not necessary. If you can do it all at once, you should, but for me this is just a guide so that I will know where I'm stopping each quarter of my gathers. So now I have notched it, and I have 4 different notch, and I'll do the same thing for the radius as well, so that when I'm sewing the upper part as well, I'll not be confused. So now these are my notches, and then I already have the marks here for this. So here I'll just notch this area as well, so that it's going to be easy for me. Basically, that's why I'm doing this. So I'm folding this again, and then I'll notch. So after doing this, what I'm going to do, the length part, not the radius part is where you're going to sew to the edge of the sleeve, but this lower part here, just like we did for the first one, I'm going to fold it the right side of my flare against the right side now of my fabric, and then I'm going to try to hide these rough edges with it. So I'll make sure to sew directly on top of the seam that I already have here. So here now you're going to gather all of this as well, and then we'll flip just like we did for the first one. So you can see that I have gone ahead to gather it as well. So now what I'm going to do now is to flip this radius part and then gather it to the edge of the sleeve as well. So you can see the double layers that we have here. So if you want your upper part to be longer, to be really long up to almost where you have your second puff. So what you need to do is just to increase the length of your flare, okay, so that I can have something longer by the time you are done. But I'm okay with what I have here, so I'll just go ahead and gather this and see what we have. So after gathering it, what I'm going to do now is to just close the sleeve, and then I'm going to sew it by the side. Okay, so I have gathered it to the head of the sleeve as well, and then I went ahead to sew it on the underarm. You can see what I have. So now this is what I have now, and this is the puffiness that I have. So like I said, you can see I have about 2 inches difference at the head of the sleeve here from my lower part. If you want it to be on the same line, you can increase the flare length that you used for the first layer. So now I'll take this to the mannequin now so that we can see what it looks like, but you can see how puffy our double sleeve is looking. Okay, so this is what the sleeve looks like on the mannequin. You can see this is the first layer and this is the second layer. You can see the puffiness we have there. Mine is really full. I used a full circle flare. You can use half circle for yours if you don't want it to be this full, and then you should make yours longer. This is a tutorial, so you can see that I used just 7 inches for my length, which when folded became around 3.5 inches or 3 inches thereabout. So you want yours to be longer a bit. You can maintain the basic sleeve length that you work with, and then you increase your flare length by maybe 3 inches to make it around 10 inches, 12 inches thereabout, depending on what you want. So I hope you enjoyed making this beautiful tutorial with me. If you enjoyed it, let us know in the comment section. Like, comment and subscribe to our channel, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.